and Waikato residents would often travel from the North Island and head to the bottom of the North Island for such an event because it was worthwhile. But now you've got the Rugby League Nines just around the corner, and you can save money. And it really is, it is about money for a lot of people. You've got to get your money's worth, and people are regretting turning up and paying a fortune for tickets, a fortune for really bad food, a fortune for alcohol that isn't even cold. And in the end, a lot of people are drinking before they even get there. So is it about the entertainment? Is it about the dress-up? Is it about the grog? Or is it about the rugby sevens? This event needs to make up its mind if it's going to continue. Or perhaps head somewhere else. Bring it to Tauranga. We're great with events like that, Jim.
That is the likeliest prospect, isn't it? The Sevens should now.
A lot of people have said, I mean, it's often been touted Dunedin, and the critics have said, well, you're just taking it from one party venue to another party venue, but obviously Dunedin has the best rugby stadium in the country, so I can see that sort of justification. But if you took it to a place maybe like Queenstown or even Rotorua, who have held the national sevens tournaments in the past and have done it very successfully, that has been about monitoring alcohol, it's been about getting middle-class New Zealand along with their families, and it's been about also spreading the word of the rugby. Many people in the past, Jim, would tell you they went to the rugby not for the sport, but for the entertainment, and as a result, ticket sales are dwindling and the event is in demise. I think they really have to think about taking it somewhere else in New Zealand, either Queenstown, Rotorua, Tauranga, or somewhere else where I guess they can sell some tickets and keep the event alive.
Great. Lavina Good, thank you very much for that analysis,
Thank you.
as always. If we all gave 50 cents, we could buy the most beautiful beach in the Abel Tasman National Park. This is the idea of Dwayne Major, who will join us. This is Awaroa Beach, 800 metres of shining sand and big blue breakers. Glimpsed, as May was saying actually before we came on air, by thousands of people over the years as they've waited for low tide when they're tramping the Abel Tasman. It is a beautiful beach.
It's absolutely lovely, and I have no idea how anyone would keep us off it. I mean,
well, on sale for $2 million. I think the current owner from Wellington paid more than that. So give a little campaign to buy it and take it off the market because it has riparian rights. Dwayne Major coming on. What do you think of this idea? Would you be digging into your pocket, Bernard? Or not?
No, $2 million sounds like quite a lot of money. You know, you could buy a small house in Auckland for that, and have a house to live in. There's lots of beaches around New Zealand you can visit and have fun without actually owning them. That's the.
You're a hard-hearted man.
That's right.
Let's talk to Dwayne Major, whose idea this is. Hello, Dwayne. Oh, Dwayne, we haven't got Dwayne yet. Yes, I suppose you could take the $2 million and buy a house in Auckland, but the whole idea, Dwayne's idea, is that what he wants... Oh, no, he is here. Hello, Dwayne, how are you?
Thanks, very good.
What gave you the idea, please?
Well, it was a Christmas Day conversation with my brother-in-law. We like to banter about lots of things, rugby, cricket especially. But then it moved on to the crazy property market, you know, politics, the flag, New Zealand, the world. But in amongst that conversation was this little opportunity we'd seen online through Facebook or something. I mean, and we had thought, isn't it crazy that it's just this elite property market? Wouldn't it be great to purchase that? And then it dawned on us with Give a Little and Facebook and the like, there is the opportunity for an average person to actually, you know, buy it and gift it. Sort of Merry Christmas, New Zealand. We laughed about it, sort of bantered. But then about a week or so later, a friend posted from the Aotearoa Inlet this pristine photo. I thought, that's it. So me and Adam got together, posted it on Facebook and said, look, what do you reckon? And very, very positive responses and some ideas to shape it up. And so, yeah, with the help of Give a Little, has been amazing. We have been able to get a pledge-style system where we've just gone for $2 million, is what the newspaper article said it might go for. And any money that's pledged doesn't leave the person's account unless we actually pull it off.
Get the beach bought. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that's and that's where we are today.
What are you up to on the pledge tally at the moment?
I think it's about $140,000. Every meeting I come out of at work, it seems to go up. 2,000 generous backers and 149,000 just gone up.
That's very impressive, as a matter of fact. I'm sure a lot of people thought you wouldn't even get near that.
Well, yeah, I know. But I've been watching a lot of cricket, so I've been seeing that ad, you know, Dream Big New Zealand. And so it's a chance to give it a shot. And, you know, I was playing backyard cricket last night and someone said, oh, that would have been a 4 if I'd hit it. So I laughed. and I thought, well, there is a chance to hit the button. And actually, honestly, it doesn't leave the account unless we pull it off. So I think, let's give it a go.
It would have been a 4 if I'd hit it. What will you? But what would Doc do with the beach? This is the thing. It sounds like a grand idea, and it's certainly a gorgeous, gorgeous beach. But what would New Zealand do with it?
Well, I just think who knows what's going to happen in the next 30 to 50 to 100 years. And that's what the point of a national park is, I suppose, is that you protect beautiful places for future generations. And you look at those photos and you think that's a beautiful place that needs to be protected for future generations. I don't think anything will happen to it. Let the beach be the beach and let people enjoy it just the way it is. And that, of course, there is always the potential of private ownership of some way, shape or form that's being developed. And I'm just saying, let it be. And let everyone enjoy it just the way nature would like it to be. I
heard Bernard beginning to make a point before you came on, Dwayne, I think. Do you really think that a new owner would keep people off the beach? Because, I mean, thousands of people are tramping through a national park only a couple of 100 metres away, really. You wouldn't be able to keep people off a beach like that?
Well, it has got riparian rights, which is different than Queen's Chain. And who knows, that maybe someone else can comment on what that might mean. Yeah, it would be pretty unkind and and not really in keeping, but it is possible. I was reading the Wild book. Have you heard that story? That guy walked around the coastline of New Zealand. He was a young 19-year-old fella. Great book. Anyway, there was some places that were easier than others, and there were certain international places, owned places that were quite difficult for him to access. So there is the possibility of it being more restrictive than less. And so, yeah, I just suppose that riparian rights thing does ring bells for me there. But I suppose you look at the photo and you imagine where is that best kept in safekeeping for future generations. It's in the hands of a body that can look after it for everyone.
I congratulate you. Well done. I think what you've done and succeeded in doing is encapsulating a fundamental value of New Zealanders and why we love New Zealand. We have a picture in our minds that there are pieces of New Zealand that are for all New Zealanders, and I think that's why people will give to your campaign. You may not get there, but it's a worthy thing.
Go for a 6 rather than a 4.
That's right.
Well, actually, sometimes you go for a 6 and think you're going to hit a 4, and then you get caught in the boundary. So I think that I certainly agree with you. I feel it's the right thing. Me and Adam couldn't not. And if we make it or not, it does remind us about that fundamental value of, hang on, we share this place and we love nature. And that's, for me, where it came from.
Good on you, Dwayne.
Background of youth work. So
Dwayne Major, thank you on the panel. Mei Chen, thanks for your company. Bernard Hickey, you too, as always. Thanks, everybody. And Checkpoint with John.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint with John Campbell on RNZ National. We're on the radio as always, we're screening live on Freeview Channel 50 and we are streaming live on the RNZ website. However you're doing so, thank you for joining us. Tonight the government front foots on the TPP, critics, kickback, disagreement, confusion, who's right. Cattle in Lake Taylor, our reporter has spoken to the owner and we learn it's happened more than once. The Ministry of Health on the Zika virus. What is their advisory and the almost miraculous journey of the Royal Albatross? But first, here's Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. The Prime Minister has staunchly defended New Zealand's intention to formally sign the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal during his first post-cabinet briefing of the year. The 279-page national interest analysis released by the government today reiterates the deal would add $2.7 billion to GDP by 2030. The agreement is due to be signed in Auckland next week. John Key insists the government is on the right side of public opinion with the TPP.
Oh, I think we're winning the argument actually with the New Zealand public, who have seen for a long period of time that asking New Zealand businesses to compete with one hand tied behind their back in the biggest economy in the world, the United States, and the third largest like Japan, puts us in a disadvantaged position.
John Key. The cattle seen wading in a high country Canterbury lake belong to businessman Hugh Fletcher and the Chief Justice Dame Sian Elias. RNZ News reported yesterday that a photo of the cattle in the lake showed a clear breach of the Regional Council's rules for protecting waterways. Conan Young reports.
RNZ News visited Lake Station today and was told by Hugh Fletcher that although Lake Taylor was fenced off from his cattle, he did occasionally let them into the lake for a drink on hot days. The lake is next door to a Department of Conservation camping ground and is a popular destination for fishers. A complaint has now been laid with the Regional Council, Environment Canterbury, over concerns about the cattle depositing excrement in the lake. The council says it investigated another complaint about animals being allowed to enter the lake in 2013. This is Conan Young.
The Ministry of Health is advising women who are pregnant or may become pregnant to avoid travelling to areas where there is Zika virus. The mosquito-borne infection has been linked to an increase in babies with abnormally small heads in South America. Outbreaks of the virus have been identified in 20 countries, including Samoa and 7 others in the Pacific. The Ministry of Health's Deputy Director of Public Health, Dr. Shirley Crawshaw, says women who are pregnant or planning pregnancy should take extra care. She says they should avoid areas with high levels of Zika transmission as a precaution.
If they are going to go to these areas, then they must be prepared to take protective measures such as wearing long sleeves, wearing long trousers, using insect repellent. And if they can avoid going or delay going, then at the moment that would be the advice to that particular group.
Dr. Shirley Crawshaw. An 88-year-old Māori war veteran, Selwyn Clark, has been begging for money and selling some of his belongings after his pension was stopped. Mr. Clark's veteran's pension and disability allowance was suspended in November after he was issued with an arrest warrant. The veteran was convicted from an occupation of Kaitaia Airport in September last year and arrested for trespassing. He's refused to front up to court, which Work and Income says is required under its policies to resume payment. Anahera Herbert Graves of Te Runanga o Iwi o Ngāti Kahu says the kaumātua feels demeaned after having to ask for help, but at the same time unbowed.
He's not going to bow to that kind of the extortion of a policy that could be satisfied easily by the Crown dropping its charges, its ridiculous charges against him for trespassing on his own land. How can you trespass on your own land?
Anahera Herbert Graves. The Ministry of Social Development says Mr. Clark is in full control of his situation and knows what he needs to do. In sport, American tennis great Serena Williams is through to the Australian Open semi-finals again. The world number one's beaten Russia's Maria Sharapova for the 18th straight time, Williams winning 6-4, 6-1 in a repeat of last year's final on the Rod Laver Arena. The defending champion goes on to play Agnieszka Radwanska after the 4th-seeded Pole beat 10th seed Carla Suarez Navarro of Spain. The Papua New Guinea Sports Minister says it's a total embarrassment that visa issues force their women's football team to withdraw from tonight's Olympic qualifying playoff against New Zealand. After losing the opening leg 7-1 in Lae at the weekend, PNG had to pull out of tonight's return match in Auckland because the squad didn't have the required visas. PNG's Sports Minister Justin Tachenko says the whole situation is unacceptable, a total embarrassment, and the Papua New Guinea's Football Association, the PNG FA, is to blame.
PNG FA totally stuffed it up. They didn't get their act together and they have let down our girls big time. I can't see why they wouldn't have had it done. They knew they were travelling to New Zealand, and to travel to New Zealand and Australia, you need a visa.
Justin Tachenko says whoever is responsible for not arranging the visas should lose their job. New Zealand cricketer Mitchell McClenaghan will be changing to the new style batting helmet following his eye injury suffered in the first one-dayer against Pakistan yesterday. McClenaghan will miss the rest of the series after a bouncer got into his helmet, fracturing his eye socket. He's having surgery on Friday. That's the news.
Tragedy on the ice.
You are very, very isolated on a solo journey, and to be alone covering that distance in very demanding conditions takes a very strong resolve.
Corruption on the court.
The suspicions were raised by an unusual amount of money being placed on one team to win a pretty obscure mixed doubles match at the Australian Open.
Controversy in the arena.
It's a disgusting example of what is happening to animals right now purely for the sake of entertainment, because that is what rodeo is about.
Allegations and investigations. Morning reports with Susie Ferguson and Guy Espiner. Weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, the controversy over the world's most common weed killer. Should it be banned? And after 10, oceanographer Craig Stevens on the role the oceans play in climate change and his fascination for the massive undersea tsunamis that occur off our coast. Join me, Catherine Ryan, from 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met service weather now to midnight tomorrow, Whanganui to Wellington and also Wairarapa. Showers late tomorrow with tomorrow morning, some possibly heavy with thunderstorms about the ranges. Showers becoming frequent at night from Horowhenua to Wellington. For the remainder of the North Island, scattered showers mostly afternoon and evening, some heavy with thunderstorms tomorrow and possibly torrential downpours about the central high country in Northland. Nelson and Marlborough excluding the Kaikoura coast, mostly cloudy with some showers. The Canterbury and the Kaikoura coast, scattered rain becoming widespread tomorrow. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, some rain or showers. Otago and Southland, scattered rain. And the Chatham Islands, low cloud, lowering to fog at times. It's almost 5:08.
Thank you very much, Katrina. See you at 5:30. Let's begin at Parliament, where Prime Minister John Key has gone on the front foot well and truly over New Zealand's intention to formally sign the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Deal, the TPP, of course. This came after the first Cabinet meeting of the year and during his first post-Cabinet media briefing of 2016. The government also today released a 279-page national interest analysis of the controversial deal 2 weeks earlier than expected. It reiterates the government's position that the deal due to be signed in Auckland next week would add $2.7 billion to GDP by the year 2030. Despite continued opposition, John Key insists the government is actually winning the TPP argument with the New Zealand public.
Who have seen for a long period of time that asking New Zealand businesses to compete with one hand tied behind their back in the biggest economy in the world, the United States, and the third largest like Japan, puts us in a disadvantaged position. I think there's been a lot of misinformation about TPP. We released a fair bit when we first announced the deal. We released the text, and the national interest analysis is just another step in that. So there's nothing new about that. We always do that.
Our political editor, Jane Patterson, was at the Prime Minister's briefing and she joins us now. Hi, Jane. A defence of the TPP straight out of the blocks after the first Cabinet meeting of the year.
That's right. Mr Key was very strong on the TPP. He said that it was actually inconceivable that New Zealand wouldn't be part of this deal, especially with the regional access that it gives New Zealand, referring to the likes of US and Japan. He also said that if New Zealand wasn't there selling those products, then Australia would just fill the vacuum, so it would put us at a complete disadvantage. Another controversial provision that Mr Key addressed was the investor state dispute provisions, and that effectively, allows other countries to sue New Zealand if they're not happy with what New Zealand is doing in other countries or if they invest here. Now, Mr Key said that in fact those provisions are there to protect New Zealand. If it's investing in another country and it's not treated professionally, as he put it, then that gives New Zealand more security. He did say too that under other trade deals there have been these provisions and there's never been a case brought against New Zealand. He thinks it's very unlikely that that would actually happen. The other aspect that he talked about was Labour Party. They've said that a future Labour government, they would want to retain the right to ban foreign nationals from buying houses here. Now, in the national analysis released today, it does speak to that. It talks about governments being able to use tools such as a tax to discourage house sales to TPP nationals, but a government could not ban them outright. Mr Key today said that it's very unclear what the legal consequences would be if a Labour government did decide to go down that track. You'd basically have a bevy of lawyers, but wasn't actually ruling out whether or not that could happen or not under this deal.
So, Joan, the Prime Minister was effectively explicitly responding to some of the major criticisms of the TPP. Obviously, there are protest meetings over the next few days, a big set-piece event coming up in Auckland tonight, I think Wellington tomorrow, and then Waitangi. And the Prime Minister is expecting to be the recipient of concerted protests there.
That's right. Discussion from Ngāpuhi at the moment about whether John Key will actually be welcome onto the lower marae at Waitangi if the government does go ahead and sign the TPP deal formally early next month, which it fully intends to do. He was asked if that's going to put him off going to Waitangi, and he said no, not at all. He's used to Waitangi being a platform for protest, that he's been heckled and he's been jostled. He said he still intends to go to the lower marae. He won't go there unless he's welcome, but he said he's not also going to gate crash if it's clear from the iwi that he is not wanted there.
Joan, we're going to come back to the TPP in a moment, but can we preview, Mr. Keys, is this the State of the Nation speech tomorrow? It's a big speech in Auckland tomorrow. Is it as formal as his State of the Nation address?
So this is the State of the Nation, his set piece for the year, where an announcement will be made, but also it's really to set out the government's priorities over the coming year, and that's already been made clear that will be the economy, security and the delivery of public services. Just what exactly that means, with a lot of public sector reform already having happened, remains to be seen. But Mr Key will confirm funding or a government contribution to the Central Rail link in Auckland, and he really talked up the importance of Auckland as a city in terms of the rest of New Zealand, and of course the importance of keeping Auckland voters happy for any party that wants to be re-elected.
Thanks, Jane. Just one final point. The Greens, who are so often the recipients of how are you going to pay for this kind of criticisms every time they announce a policy, they're proposing to set up a unit in Treasury to provide costings for all political parties when major policies are announced.
That's right, their answer to it is get Treasury to do the work, because of course the government can use Treasury to cost government policies, but opposition parties have to do their own work, and that's mainly out of leaders' funds. John Key responded to that today, saying that it would probably cost more than the estimates of between $1 and $3 million a year, depending on whether it was election year or not. And also he said that a unit like that wouldn't actually take the politics out of policy making. The Greens are seeking cross-party support for that unit. That's just been scuppered with National saying they won't support it.
Jane Patterson, our political editor, live from Parliament. Thank you so much. The TPP, of course, strongly polarises people, but it is a lengthy and complex agreement. There is also a sense that many people don't really know what's in it and haven't formed conclusions on what it means. Is this the case? Well, to check this out, reporter Muriel Baker went to the Auckland suburb of Newmarket with a simple question.
Can I ask what you know about the TPPA?
The CPPA.
The TPPA.
Oh, the T. I know nothing. I'm from Wellington. Am I supposed to know something?
Not too much, really.
I don't know anything. It's the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, the big trade deal that's been in the news a lot recently. Have you heard it at all? No.
I don't know too much about it, actually.
Excuse me, can I ask what you know about the TPPA?
What's that?
The Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement.
I'm not really familiar with.
Do you think it's something people should make the effort to learn about?
Yeah, I think long term it has a significant impact, especially on a country like New Zealand, which depends so heavily on its exports. So, yeah, I think paying a little attention and doing a little research is probably a good idea.
I know it's a trade agreement, is it not? And I think, isn't it? I'm not too sure, but it doesn't seem very balanced in what we get and then what we are giving away.
I think the losses through not being involved are greater than the losses in being involved.
Do you think it's a good or bad deal for New Zealand?
Doesn't sound like the best deal from the few things that I've seen.
Have you done much research about it?
Not a lot. It sounded like for a lot of the journalists it was fairly hard to wade through the thousands of pages and so forth as well.
So it's not very enticing for you, is it?
No.
Politicians have said that there's billions and billions of wealth that are going to come off the back of it. But how we get there, I have no idea.
5:15 on Checkpoint. Our economics correspondent, Patrick O'Mara, has been poring through the 279-page national interest analysis released today by Trade Minister Todd McClay. It argues the 12-nation trade pact is in the national interest while protecting the government's right to make its own laws. I guess there's nothing surprising about the government saying that, Patrick. Does this 279-page analysis released today tell us anything new?
No, John, not really. I mean, it's very much a reiteration of information that we've already had out from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. As they pointed out in it, it's estimated to increase GDP by an extra 2.7 billion by 2030. Look, mainly around reductions in tariffs and non-tariff barriers in the agricultural sector. No surprise, we actually had all that information out when the agreement was, we first heard about the agreement back in October. And look, but really, if you look at it, that's about 1% of GDP. So, look, it seems very modest at the least. But what the government could argue, and I think legitimately so, is that what about if we didn't sign up? You know, and this is, I think, the big issue. Would we be better off not being part of this agreement and being left out in the cold? Now, they talk about it saying that it would actually marginalise New Zealand. We would see the economic decline of it. I think that's rather strong language. It's not quite as bad as that, but certainly that's a valid question to ask. Look, opponents, though, they're not impressed by that argument at all. Jane Kelsey, a noted TPP critic, she points out that this is just cheerleading, and it talks up the supposed gains, and it really underestimates the huge downside. And the one in particular that they're worried about is actually that cost of the loss of sovereignty.
So this document is not really going to sway people. If you're for it, you're going to remain for it. If you're against it, you're going to remain against it. Is that your sense of what was released today, Patrick?
Oh yeah, no, look, very much so, John, and it's certainly been very polarising. In a lot of ways, it's because the TPP, it's not a trade deal in the traditional sense. It is what it is a trade and an investment deal. It's to recognise the fact that there are companies now operating, one company operating in a number of countries around the region, and therefore it's taking this a step further. And this is where the sovereignty issue has become so important. You know, of course, the government's arguing that on issues such as the Treaty of Waitangi, they will protect Māori rights in that area. It will still allow them to regulate in the government interest. And you know, this is where their opponents say no such thing. They've been looking through the texts and they say that's not the case. We could drive trucks through some areas of this in that way. And look, I'll give you a good example about the investment chapter. Now, I did a piece on that late last year, looking at this controversial issue around the investor-state dispute settlement, around these arbitration panels that are supposed to be set up if foreign firms sue the government. Now, I talked to 4 lawyers who specialise in this particular area, and I got 4 different interpretations of what they think that's going to be. And it certainly seems to come down to what their view on trade and the importance of trade, where their view lies.
Patrick O'Mara, our economics correspondent, thank you so much. We really appreciate it, Patrick, who went through at a high rate of knots the 279-page document that was released today. We are going to look at the TPP at length over the next few days between now and its signing in Auckland. And of course, we will talk to the Minister and to critics about the document and what it means for our future. The time on Checkpoint is almost 5:20. Last night we brought you the story of a herd of cattle in a Canterbury high country lake. A holidaymaker took the photo from a Department of Conservation campground beside Lake Taylor. Lake Taylor is 70 kilometres northwest of Christchurch, off the beaten track up a windy and narrow gravel road. This afternoon we were able to confirm the property around Lake Taylor is co-owned by Hugh Fletcher and his wife, Chief Justice Dame Sian Elias, who have a holiday home on the land. They own 3/4 of the property. The land title shows Edward Phipps, who passed away last year, owns the remaining 1/4 share. Our reporter Sally Murphy drove to Lake Taylor today to speak with Mr Fletcher.
Well, today I drove up to Lake Station to talk to the owners about this picture, obviously showing cattle right in Lake Taylor, right next to their farming station. When I arrived, there were no cattle in the lake. There was actually no one there at all. When I went up the driveway to Lake Station, Hugh Fletcher came out. He declined to be interviewed, but he simply said that on hot days they do let the cattle into the lake to have a drink, but he assured me they do not have access to the lake continuously, and I did see there was a clear fence between the lake and the farm.
So Sally, Hugh Fletcher is an owner of the station and he came out and told you that they do on hot days let cattle into the water?
Yes, he said on occasions when it is extremely hot, like the day when that photo was taken that we have on our website, he did say that, you know, it is general practice, but ECAN's strict rules are that no cattle are allowed in high country lakes, and that's what Fish and Game are annoyed with. They say that the regional council here are not very strict with enforcing the rules. They say that farms in high stations like Hugh Fletcher's, which is an hour and a half up in a windy gravel road, are allowed to farm simply like they did 100 years ago, and they're not enforcing the rules. But ECAN say they do take complaints seriously. They said they've had a complaint about Hugh Fletcher's property back in 2013, and now this one last week.
Sally, we received a picture in the past couple of days, but in fact you have today received evidence that the cattle have been in this water before?
Exactly. Well, Hugh Fletcher said it's not a common occurrence, but I've had a few people contact me after we first ran the story yesterday to say that they have themselves seen cattle in the lake on numerous occasions. I've even had tourists from Finland email me saying that when they were staying by the lake, they saw the cattle roaming in and out of the lake on occasion. So I don't think this is strictly a one-off, but ECAN say that their compliance team are looking into it.
Our reporter Sally Murphy, who's been up to Lake Taylor today. Joining us now is Federated Farmers President Dr. William Ralston. Dr. Ralston, thank you for coming on to Checkpoint. We appreciate your time. Is it appropriate for those cattle to be in Lake Taylor?
Well, I think it's appropriate for ECAN to check this out and see that they're complying with regulations.
Okay. Do you think it's appropriate for those cattle to be in Lake Taylor?
Well, I don't know if Lake Taylor is considered one of the sensitive lakes, but certainly sensitive lakes are not meant to have cattle in them. So if it is, then it would not be appropriate. But I'm not saying that cattle should be out of all waterways in the high country, because it would just be impractical.
Okay, so you're saying there are occasions that cattle can stand in waterways and, of course, excrete. You think this is acceptable?
Now, John, I think you're trying to put words in my mouth. I don't think that's really.
Well, I think it was what you just said. Sorry, I was just.
The conversation that we should be having. I think what we need to think about is how practical is it to fence off every single waterway in the high country, and we also have to think about what the density of stock is. So
wait a sec. Sorry, can I just come in there, Dr. Ralston? That waterway is fenced off. That waterway is fenced off. So, in fact, in order for the cattle to be in the water, they have to be let in the water. So the issue of fencing does not exist here. So, in fact, that's a red herring.
You asked me. John, that was not the question you asked me. You asked me, is it appropriate for cattle to be in any waterway in the high country? And the answer is that we have to look at a practical situation here, because if you've got one cattle beast in a square kilometre, it's not going to have much of an environmental impact, and it would be ridiculous to have to fence off every waterway in the high country.
So how do we get the Balancing Act right? If it's how many cattle are too many cattle?
We do need to try and get the Balancing Act right.
How many cattle are too many cattle?
That's what the Land and Water Forum has been working their way through, to look at what is practical and what isn't practical. And I think it's important to look at, what is the situation with the waterway, what is the case-by-case situation, and how practical is it to actually be putting a fence.
Okay, what about regional plans? What about regional plans? Do you think your members and farmers generally should adhere to regional plans?
Yes, they should.
Okay, Canterbury Land and Water Regional Plan, stock exclusion, 5.68.3. If it lists, stock exclusion is listed as, and I quote, cattle standing in any lake.
Yeah.
They're absolutely excluded.
And so I've already said to you that it is appropriate for Environment Canterbury to investigate this, not backing away from that.
So if cattle standing in any lake are absolutely excluded, should there be cattle standing in any lake?
Well, if that's what the rule says, then it would be a breach of the rules. But I'm telling you that there's an ongoing conversation about how practical that rule actually is.
Well, it's a convenient conversation for Federated Farmers to have and your members to have. Why do you think Canterbury Land and Water Regional Plan contains the phrase cattle standing in any lake in its stock exclusion provisions?
Well, actually, if you have a look back through the rules, there was a rule that said that every single waterway had to be fenced off. And it was, sometimes these rules slip through and they can be quite impractical. And I think it's important that we have, practical rules that can be enforced and that and farmers can actually afford to actually adhere to them. because if they can't, then it makes a nonsense of the rule.
Dr. William Ralston, who is the head of Federated Farmers, thank you very much indeed for your time this evening. We appreciate it. 26 minutes past 5. Hundreds of seasonal workers are stuck in Vanuatu and could miss out on crucial work in New Zealand after Air New Zealand suspended its flights to and from there. The airline says the runway at Port Vila is damaged and it has halted services before it gets dangerous. Now that means seasonal workers booked to fly on Air New Zealand in the next few weeks to pick fruit in New Zealand are grounded until a solution is found. They might be able to get on alternative flights, but they're now much more expensive because of seat shortages. Giraffe Van Beek is the National Labour Coordinator for Horticulture New Zealand, and Giraffe joins us on the phone now. How serious is this? Oh, on Skype. Giraffe, nice to see you. How serious is this?
Good afternoon, John. This is very serious for many people, not just for the workers that are coming over, but also for their communities, who really rely after Cyclone Pam, as you may remember, devastated a large community in Vanuatu, and these workers are coming here to New Zealand to work and help their community rebuild. But also for the horticulture and viticulture industry, these people are vital. They have been coming for many years now, many of them, not all of them. We've been new workers there as well. These people are very productive, and they come here to work, and we as an industry welcome them, and we'll do anything we can to get them here.
How serious is this? Do you know how many people are affected at this stage?
Yeah, it's over 500, which
Wow.
is rather a considerable amount. But these workers come here for 7 months. Predominantly, the harvest season is the most important. In Hawke's Bay, there's about 480 still to come. There are already quite a number here. Close to 3,000 will be here working, and we've got a very big crop. It's going to be a record once again, which is good for New Zealand economy, is good for Hawke's Bay economy, but also good for our workers when they come over, because they take a serious amount of remittance home, which is really great. Fantastic.
Okay, so yes, so that is it has a big impact on the villages these workers are from, because they do send money home. What about the growers here? Can they get workers if the Nevans can't get here?
We will work very hard. The policy, the recognised seasonal employer policy, the cornerstone is New Zealanders first, and we try and work very hard with government and with our local people to actually get them into work. It's very important. They're our first call. And we'll try harder again to replace our Nevans if need be. But we think that will be a hard call. Hence, we're trying as hard as we can to bring them in. Plus, also, it's very important for them that they come as well to aid their community to rebuild what has happened to them when Cyclone Pam hit last year.
Giraffe Van Beek is the National Labour Coordinator for Horticulture New Zealand. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. 29 and a half minutes past 5 on Checkpoint. Thank you for joining us. You can give us feedback. Email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Facebook and Twitter. Our address is checkpointrnz. You can go to the website radionz.co.nz. But let's have a break from all of that and listen to the news headlines from Katrina Batten.
The Prime Minister has defended New Zealand's intention to sign the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal. The agreement is due to be formally signed in Auckland next week. A 279-page national interest analysis released today reiterates that the deal would add $2.7 billion to gross domestic product by 2030. John Campbell insists that with the TPP, the government is on the right side of public opinion. The owner of cattle seen wading in a high country Canterbury lake says he does sometimes let them into the lake. RNZ News reported yesterday that a photo of the cattle in Lake Taylor showed a breach of the Regional Council's rules for protecting waterways. Businessman Hugh Fletcher, who owns the cattle with the Chief Justice Dame Sian Elias, told RNZ News that although the lake is fenced off from his cattle, he does occasionally let them in for a drink on hot days. The Ministry of Health is advising women who are pregnant or who may become pregnant to avoid travelling to areas with the Zika virus. The mosquito-borne infection has been linked to an increase in birth defects in babies in South America. Outbreaks of the virus have been identified in 20 countries, including Samoa and 7 other Pacific nations. The police are investigating online threats made against a woman who filmed herself sexually abusing a 1-year-old child for $300. Crystal Harvey was sentenced yesterday to 8 months home detention, 100 hours of community work and a year of post-detention conditions. The Green Party says it wants to get away from the perception that the party is too radical for government. The party's co-leader, Materia Ture, says its ideas are often attacked as outlandish, but then adopted by other parties as sensible solutions. The authorities in Israel are reported to have approved the construction of more than 150 new homes in Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank. The United States and United Nations oppose the expansion of Jewish settlements on Palestinian territory, saying it undermines the peace process. Those are the headlines. More news, sport and weather at 6.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Let's turn to business now with business editor Giles Beckford. And Giles, you're at the Finance and Expenditure Select Committee today, where Air New Zealand's top brass fronted up. What do they have to say for themselves?
Basically, they painted a picture, John, of an airline that's doing extremely well, despite all the volatility that there is in fuel and competition. Basically, they're saying that they've decided that the way forward for them is to have bigger planes, for instance, flying around the country here, which is why they've just upgraded, or they're in the process of upgrading the domestic fleet with the new ATR 72s. And they make no apologies for ditching some of the smaller places, such as Westport and Kaikoura and Whakatane, which rather controversially they said it just wasn't economic to fly to last year. They're saying we've tried to make those routes work. They don't. And from that point of view, what we're doing is to enhance the service to other areas. And really, it's a case of saying we want to get more bums on seats. And the way they're going to do that is they're actually going to cut fares. Can't tell you by how much, but they're planning that there should be, what they say, some big discounting fares here at home and also fares on overseas routes.
So they prefigured that at the Select Committee, Giles. They said this is going to happen.
Yes, made it quite clear that in order to get people in their planes, which is costing them obviously money, but the planes are more fuel efficient than they ever used to be.
And fuel is much cheaper than it was, say, 12 months ago.
And fuel is much cheaper than it used to be. So what they aim to do is to get market share and to maintain market share against some pretty stiff competition, then they're definitely going to be cutting fares. Christopher Luxton, the chief executive, wasn't able or wasn't willing to say by how much, but certainly, as he puts it, there would be a big discounting.
OK. What about the financial results? Any discussion of that?
No, other than to say, haven't we done well? Growing at 12% a year for the past few years. They've recorded record profits in the past 4 years. So if you remember, it wasn't so long ago. This was an airline that we were saying was a bit of a basket case. Everybody said, why did the Labour government bail it out? Well, you have to say now, it's the star performer amongst world airlines. You know, it's no accident that this carrier, which we as taxpayers still own 54% of, it's no accident that it continues to be rated one of the world's best airlines.
What happened on the markets today, Giles?
Oh, pretty ho-hum, John. We're just marking time, down about 30-odd points, but look, nothing to fret about.
OK. Down 30 points and nothing to fret about. Giles Beckford. Thanks so much, Giles. Good to talk to you. Giles Beckford is our political editor. 26 minutes to 6 on Checkpoint. The Ministry of Health is advising women who are pregnant or who may become pregnant to avoid areas with high levels of Zika transmission. Now, the mosquito-borne virus has now been identified in 20 countries in a particular region, starting in Mexico and heading south through parts of Central America, Venezuela, and as far south as Paraguay and Brazil. In Brazil alone, the World Health Organization has identified almost 4,000 cases of microcephaly in the past 12 months, a fetal deformation in which infants are born with smaller than usual brains. But getting clarity around location isn't easy because Zika has come and gone in many countries over some decades now, including the South Pacific, where the CDC, that's the International Centers for Disease Control, have reported the first local transmission of the Zika virus in Samoa. I sought to clarify all of the above with Dr. Shirley Crawshaw, Deputy Director of Public Health with the Ministry of Health.
So yes, it is in our sort of neighbourhood in terms of the Pacific Islands. At the moment, there's a report of an active outbreak of Zika virus in Samoa. Just to mention, put this into context, there have been a number of cases of Zika virus over the years around French Polynesia, New Caledonia, Cook Islands, Vanuatu, etc. So it has been something that we've had around.
Okay, can we look at the specific instance of Samoa now? There is local transmission of Zika in Samoa at present. Is that a statement of fact?
That's what I'm understanding from the up-to-date websites which we use to update our own website here.
Okay, so what is the ministry's advisory then about going to Samoa if you are pregnant or hoping to become pregnant or may become pregnant?
There are a whole list of countries which are available on the website, and for the population, if they need to get advice, Safe Travel is a really good website which we keep up to date. We've got a good link via our website to CDC, Centre for Disease Control, who have a very regular update of countries currently where you're seeing transmission of the virus.
The worst environment for Zika at the moment is Brazil, is that correct?
Well, Brazil has been very, very much in the news. I don't think you can say it's the worst environment, but you can say it's where there's been a marked increase in number of cases of infants born with this term microcephaly, which is a small head and an underdeveloped brain. And there's been a knowledge of a link which is evolving. It's certainly not yet what we call a causal association, but a link evolving between the Zika virus and the number of babies born with this condition, microcephaly.
So what's the ministry's risk assessment about going to Brazil? Is there a ministry advisory specific to Brazil about the risk of going there now?
Well, it wouldn't be specific to Brazil because it wouldn't be appropriate just to give advice to one country when there are in fact a number of countries with ongoing transmission of Zika virus.
Okay, in terms of the countries where Zika is most likely to be contracted, what is the ministry's advisory?
Okay, well, our focus here at the ministry has always been to provide relevant and significant warnings or advice, and rather than focus exclusively on lists of countries, which in any case are not exhaustive, we've identified areas in the subtropics and the tropics where a particular type of mosquito is prevalent. And it's this mosquito which at any time could be transmitting the Zika virus.
Okay, so let's pick one of those areas. What are you saying to people? Are you saying go and be cautious, wear repellents, wear long clothing, sleep under nets, or are you saying, you know, gosh, maybe you should reconsider whether you go there at all? I just am really interested on the continuum. Where do you stand? What is the risk?
Okay, well, we've really got to look at this rather than looking at a sort of general piece of advice. We've got to look at this in that most people, those who are not pregnant or not planning to be pregnant, Zika virus is a relatively mild virus. Where the advice is now coming in, and it's a very precautionary advice at the moment, and it's not yet based on absolute evidence, is for those women who are pregnant or planning to become pregnant. And it's that particular group where I think they need to take particular caution in terms of how, if they are going to go to these areas, then they must be prepared to take protective measures such as wearing long sleeves in the tops, wearing long trousers, using insect repellent. And if they can avoid going, that would be the advice. If they can avoid going or delay going, then at the moment, whilst we still haven't got an absolute clear picture of risk, that would be the advice to that particular group.
Dr. Shirley Crawshaw, Deputy Director of Public Health with the Ministry of Health. 20 minutes to 6 on Checkpoint. Let's go back to the situation in Vanuatu. Now, Air New Zealand has suspended flights in and out of Vanuatu, Port Vila, because the runway is unsafe as they see it. But other airlines continue to use the airport, including Virgin and Air Vanuatu. And Air New Zealand code shares flights with Air Vanuatu, which means you might book through Air New Zealand and travel on an Air Vanuatu plane. And in this case, that can mean Air New Zealand is cancelling your ticket on a flight that is still taking off. Confused? Well, you're not alone. Ashley Inslee is a 7th-year medical student doing surgical work up in Vanuatu over summer. She'd booked through Air New Zealand, but she was flying Air Vanuatu. Her ticket has been cancelled, but the flight's still going. Huh? Here's Ashley herself from Vanuatu to explain.
basically, Air New Zealand has cancelled my flight. Well, they've cancelled the service to New Zealand, and it cancelled my flight from there home. And they gave me no warning, and then said to me, "You need to rebook your flight which is now $1,000." And I originally paid about $250 for it, so it's left me out of pocket. I'm a student at the moment. I'm here on a student placement, and it's left me basically. I have to come up with $800 in order to get home, which I don't have. So
Ashley, one of the things
kind of frustrating.
one of the things I want to look at is you booked through Air New Zealand, but you weren't flying Air New Zealand, right? So you were on a code share flight, and what plane were you actually going to be on?
Yeah, so okay, I did book through Air New Zealand, and that was a code share. So I was booked, but they booked me onto the Air Vanuatu flight, Air Vanuatu plane that was coming home to Auckland from Port Vila on the 31st. But that wasn't an Air New Zealand plane, it was an Air Vanuatu one.
And so you booked an Air New Zealand ticket, but you were on an Air Vanuatu plane. Then Air New Zealand cancels your ticket because they're no longer flying out of Vila. But in fact, that flight, the Air Vanuatu flight, is still flying.
Exactly, yeah.
Which is just seriously bizarre. So you've had your seat cancelled, but the flight still exists.
Yes, exactly. And then I was told to rebook. They would refund my money, but I had to rebook the same seat that I initially had already booked and paid for. So, except it's now gone up $800. So,
and if you booked on Air Vanuatu in the first instance, none of this would be happening, and you would still be on exactly the same flight in exactly the same seat with exactly the same cheap fare.
Yes, exactly. And that's the situation, thankfully, one of my friends here is in. So she booked through Air Vanuatu on the same flight that we were both supposed to go home on, but she's fine. So it's a bit disheartening, really.
And you've had to come up with how much extra money?
$804.
Which is a lot of money when you're a student, right?
Yeah, so, well, initially it was going to cost me $1,200 to fly with Air New Zealand, and that's covering costs to rerouting through Fiji, the accommodation there, then my accommodation home and all that kind of stuff. And they said to me, well, if you can't afford that, please book with another airline or another carrier. So that's what I've done. I've booked with Air Vanuatu now for $804 as opposed to over $1,200 with Air New Zealand.
And in the first instance, just to repeat this because it's magnificently absurd, with all due respect to you who are $800 out of pocket because of this, you've booked to fly with Air Vanuatu, but actually you were already on Air Vanuatu, albeit...
Exactly, yes.
So this is kind of nuts, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. Air New Zealand declined to be interviewed on Checkpoint, but its chief executive, Christopher Luxon, says the company has stopped flying to Vanuatu because while the Port Vila runway is not completely unsafe, the company is withdrawing its services before it becomes that way. He says any code share tickets booked through Air New Zealand have also been suspended. And those customers will receive a full refund and can work with the company's customer service team to be reaccommodated. Since we spoke to Ashley this afternoon, she says her siblings and friends have chipped in to loan her the $800 she needs to get home. She says she's very grateful for family and friends looking out for me, but a wee bit disheartened, especially for Airline of the Year. All I need to do now is organise my visa for an extra day and I'll be home free. Interestingly, the World Bank is going to refund the rebuilding of that airport up there after Cyclone Pam, but also just general wear and tear. It does need the work. The money is in the pipeline. It was going to happen, and then of course that state of disarray with MPs being arrested, the corruption allegations and everything falling over in Vanuatu has put this on hold. So the money exists, and it looks like the runway will be rebuilt in the not too distant future. 6:15 is the time on Checkpoint. Police are investigating threats against a woman who filmed herself performing a sex act on a 1-year-old boy for money. Crystal Harvey was sentenced to 8 months home detention, 100 hours community work and a year of post-detention conditions. When she appeared in the Manukau District Court yesterday, the case sparked outrage on social media, with many people saying Harvey should be behind bars, but some people have threatened to do Harvey physical harm. Our Auckland reporter Edward Gay has been following the story.
A spokesperson for the police has confirmed they're taking the threat seriously, but would not comment further while the matter is under investigation. In court yesterday, the Crown asked Judge Phil Recordon to jail Harvey for performing a sex act on a 1-year-old boy and selling the video to a pedophile. But the judge opted for home detention after a probation and psychological report found she had a low risk of reoffending. The 23-year-old will also be monitored for 20 months. Her lawyer, Annabelle Maxwell-Scott, told RNZ that means Harvey will have to return to court every 3 months, and she'll be in the system longer than if she had been jailed. Stop Demand works to combat the sexual denigration of women and children. Its founder, Denise Ritchie, says when abuse is filmed and shared, it can have ongoing effects on victims.
In effect, they continue to be victims throughout their entire life. And this can be often psychologically crippling.
Miss Ritchie says the effect on victims of this kind of offending escalates as the child becomes aware that pedophiles online can continue to use the images for their gratification. Commenting on the Harvey case, Miss Ritchie says her organisation does not endorse threats of violence. But since Crystal Harvey's sentencing, some people have taken to social media and some are threatening to do Harvey harm. Child Matters is a charitable trust dedicated to the prevention of child abuse. Its chief executive, Anthea Simcock, says people need to start asking themselves what they can do as a neighbour, friend and member of a community.
We can always palm it off on someone else, but it's so much harder to say, look, was there one little thing that I might be able to do in the future?
Miss Simcock says while it's important people talk about child abuse, threatening someone was the work of bullies and cowards.
Don't just respond in anger. You're not helping a situation. And if you really want something to be done, start with yourself.
In Auckland for Checkpoint, Edward Gay.
Thanks, Edward. The story is developing in the past few hours. Crystal Harvey has been remanded in custody. We can't say why an RNZ reporter was at court but was stopped from entering the building. 12 minutes to 6. Videos uploaded to social media purport to show Russian airstrikes in Deraa, as well as the aftermath of attacks in Aleppo and Tasaka. We are in Syria now, of course, where the fighting simply doesn't stop. Deborah Lutterberg from Reuters looks at the latest episodes.
A Russian fighter jet appears to hover over Deraa in Syria. And then comes the explosion. Amateur video, which cannot be independently verified by Reuters, appears to show war raging across the country. In Aleppo, panic-filled streets. People try to put out the flames of a burning car after what they say was a car bomb. Others douse a building on a broken open street. In the largely Kurdish far northeast, an ambulance heads to the hospital. A motorcycle bomb had gone off in a mostly Christian area, killing 3 people and wounding another 7. Islamic State is claiming responsibility. The Kurdish YPG is fighting IS with the support of U.S.-led airstrikes. It's a fight where the cost rises every day.
Reuters' Deborah Lutterberg. 10.5 minutes to 6. Time for some feedback. Lots of feedback on the TPP. There always is, no matter how RNZ covers this, whether it's on any of our news and current affairs programs or on the website. You always have opinions on this. The TPP. Adele, I don't feel well informed, but I certainly feel we're being pushed into something that the majority of citizens don't know what it is. Alicia, everyone knows the government only tells you the people highlights what they want you to know, not what you need to know. Ilka, almost no one knows what the TPP is. That's the irony. In the age of information, people seem to be less aware of what is happening around them. I suppose the government is not going to announce the controversial points either. Gerard, I'm flabbergasted so many people are still ignorant or don't care. This goes across the political spectrum, and this is obviously a big reason why the signing is in Auckland. Matt, just bizarre how uninformed and disengaged ordinary Kiwis seem to be about the TPP. Get in touch. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Thank you for all of your feedback. It's great to hear from you. Let's go to Melbourne and the tennis. The defending Australian Open tennis champion Serena Williams has claimed her place in the tournament semi-final with yet another win over long-term rival Maria Sharapova. I think there must be about 17 or 18 consecutively. We'll discuss that in a moment. But the crowd favourite Roger Federer is having a tougher time against his quarter-final opponent Thomas Berdych, with the first set tied up at 5-all. A short time ago, tennis correspondent Dave Worsley is at the Australian Open in Melbourne and joins us now by Skype. Dave, it's nice to talk to you. Serena Williams was all over Maria Sharapova, wasn't she?
That's correct. She was all over her, 6-4, 6-1, and that's 18 in a row. I don't really know if you can call it a rivalry when no one she hasn't won since 2004.
They're seated They're seated so close together. It should be much closer than it was. I didn't see much because obviously we're working here, but I just saw Serena was looking in magnificent form. Her timing, her fitness. Gosh, she's a fine tennis player.
That's correct. She really is the top player for a long time now. And it was just that anomaly last year at the US Open semi-finals where she was beaten by Roberta Vinci. I'm sure she would have won the Grand Slam of all the 4 major titles in 1 year. And I think she's going to start pretty well here this year as well. She's going to have to play Agnieszka Radwanska, who won over Carla Suarez Navarro in the other quarterfinal. And I think Serena Williams will be too strong for Radwanska as well.
Yeah, she's just too strong for women's tennis, full stop, isn't she? How great is she, Dave? In the ranks of the great, is she getting near the very top now?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, you've got Martina Navratilova up there as one of the greats, Steffi Graf up there as well. And I really think Serena Williams fits in with those couple of players. Yeah. She's got the titles. She's got the, I guess, almost the bullying ability on the court to overpower and mentally overpower as well as physically as well. So I think she really is one of the greats of all time.
Yeah, she's really looking like she's enjoying her tennis too, which she would do if you were winning and earning a lot of money, you know. But boy, she looks confident and comfortable on the court.
But what do you think about the outfit, though? I mean, everybody talks about the outfits, and we're just like, oh my goodness, did she forget to put it all on? But no, she's out there, she's doing what she wants.
I think she's
doing it well.
I think she's extraordinary. Crowd favourite Roger Federer. How's he going against his fellow Thomas Berdych?
Well, Berdych is the 6th seed and has beaten him before. In fact, beaten him 6 times, although Federer does have a 15-6 record over him. And in fact, the last 4 matches they've played, it has been Federer winning those. And we're in the first set tiebreak right now with Federer leading by 4 points to 2. So got a little bit of a mini break there, as you call it, in the tiebreak, and looking fairly good to take it out if he can hold his serve. But Berdych is a player who gives him a lot of trouble, and in fact gives everybody a lot of trouble. That's why he's ranked number 6 in the world.
Yeah, very quickly, Dave, because we've got to move on, but does the crowd still love Fed?
Yes, they love him, and even Novak Djokovic says, hey, they love him more than they love me. I'm number 1 in the world.
Yeah. Dave Worsley, thanks so much, live from the Australian Open. What a nice way of earning a living, sitting, watching tennis being played. The carcass of a 5th sperm whale has washed up on England's coast after 4 others died in a spate of beachings in the past few days. Here's Nathan Frandino from Reuters.
On England's east coast, a 5th sperm whale has been found washed up on the shore. The discovery of the carcass here in Skegness came after 4 others died in a spate of beachings in recent days. Witnesses had spotted a pod of up to 6 whales close to the shoreline on Friday, but by Monday the animals had all left their marks on the coast, their remains drifting in and out with the shallow tide waters. Small groups of people have gathered around the corpses taking photographs. Someone had even spray painted on one whale's tail. The cause of the deaths was not immediately known. Officials say autopsies will be performed.
What a magnificent creature. Talking of which, let's go to Dunedin now, where the Royal Cam live stream has been set up by the Department of Conservation. We can see a northern royal albatross nesting at Tairoa Head. Now, you can see it online. If you're listening in the car now, don't worry, you can see it later in any stage. Just go to the Department of Conservation's website. And we've got it up on screen if you are watching, but it's absolutely available for you at any time. The chick hatched on the 21st of January. Over the next few weeks, its parents will take turns guarding it and feeding it. After this, it will be left alone for extended periods while both parents head out to sea to forage. If you're watching online, I think you'll see one of the parents brooding the chick. Are we seeing that now? maybe we're not. We're just seeing the chick looking transcendently calm, actually. The adults change over their chick rearing duties on the nest about every second day. It's entirely egalitarian in a albatross family. Joining us now by Skype video from Portobello is the Department of Conservation's Threatened Species Ambassador, Nicola Toki. Nikki, it's great to have you on the program. I love these birds. I find it almost metaphysically moving that when they set off on their big flights, how far do they go and how long do they go for?
Right, so when this chick sets off, and if you're watching online, you're looking at Dad. He's sitting on the chick, and you can only see the chick when he stands up, and you'll see the chick kind of a wee ball of feathers, like a tennis ball with feathers underneath. And once that chick grows and grows and grows, in about September, October, he'll spread out his wings for the first time, and he'll hover a little bit, and then he travels around the world, so around the Southern Ocean for 4 years without touching land again.
It's just for me. I mean, I've watched everything David Attenborough has ever made, and I love. But for me, this is one of the great stories in nature. It's their first flight, and they take off and they go for 4 years, and they do the entire globe.
They do. Well, to be a little bit more honest, occasionally we'd had the odd albatross chick that spreads his wings out and rolls down the hill and splashes into the water, and then our very caring rangers go out in a boat and scoop them up and they have another go. But technically, their first flight is a 4-year journey where they don't touch land again, and then they make their way back here to Dunedin's Taiaroa Head, which is really, really important to the Dunedin community. We get 150,000 visitors a year out there. We're opening it up basically to the whole world now and saying, look, if you don't have the chance to come here and see them, then you have a window into an albatross family's world for the next 8 months.
Am I anthropomorphising? Is that the word when I say that I think Dad looks quite proud sitting there on top of his chick? I think he's looking quite pleased with himself.
He is. I think Dad looks quite proud too. And although, we as humans are a wee bit disappointed that the weather hasn't showcased the beautiful view that Royal Cam usually has.
It's still pretty magic, that view, yeah.
Yeah, although I just rang the ranger and said, can you please go out and wipe the camera because it's raining? He said no.
So Mum's off at the moment, so Dad's having his turn on the nest and Mum is off where? Foraging, getting food?
Yep, she could be 20 kilometres away, she could be a lot further, and she's getting food, and then she'll come back. And if you're watching, I've just been sitting and watching with my mum, and we've seen other albatross wheeling around in the background. She'll come back, they'll do a swap, he'll take off and get some food, and she'll tuck bubs underneath her. So it's a very, very special thing. We've never done a webcam before, so we've moved to the 21st century. We're quite proud.
Yeah. So we're right in New Zealand. It's very exciting. We're moving together, us and the albatross. Nikki, for people who aren't watching now, this is just live streaming the whole time, isn't it? So you're not being cheated of a wonderful experience if you're only listening. You can actually see this at any stage.
At any stage. We did toy with having lights on the camera at night time, but we're just not sure on how that will affect the albatross.
It's not a discotheque, is it?
No, that's right. And so at night time they have a wee bit of privacy and you can see the lights of Port Khamas. That's about it. But the rest of the time, if it's daytime, you'll see plenty. So tune in.
Well, it's lovely. You've got, in 20 seconds or less, how on earth do they know where to come back to? They fly for 4 years and they return to the same spot. Has anyone ever answered that question?
No, that's a question that we haven't quite nailed. Probably to do with magnetic poles, probably a little bit to do with something going on internally, but not something that I can tell you in 20 seconds.
It's too big. It's too big to understand that one, and maybe nature's allowed its mysteries. Thanks, Nikki. It's nice to talk to you as always, and we warmly recommend going and having a look online at that magnificent webcam, because not only is Dad proud sitting there and you might get a peek of the chick underneath or Mum coming in to take over, but you also get to see that magnificent view. Now, it's 10 seconds before 6 o'clock, and in 4 seconds, 3, 2, 1, we'll get these things. Kia Kia ora everyone, you are with Checkpoint with John Campbell and our excellent team on RNZ National, on the radio as always, screening live on Freeview Channel 50 and streaming live like the Albatross on the RNZ website. However you are joining us, thank you for doing so. Tonight, well, in the next half hour, because we're 2/3 of the way through, what do people really know about the TPP? And Oxford dictionaries are accused of sexism. We find out more, but first here's the news with Katrina Batten.
Ngā mihi nui, good evening. The Prime Minister says it's inconceivable New Zealand would not be part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership to be signed in Auckland on February the 4th. John Key has defended New Zealand's inclusion in the trade deal after the first cabinet meeting of the year. The National Interest Analysis released today reiterates the deal would add $2.7 billion to GDP by 2030. Despite ongoing opposition, Mr Key says there are clear advantages, including access to major global markets. The Labour Party says the deal undermines Parliament's sovereignty by preventing a future government from banning foreign buyers from the housing market. Mr Key says any move to break such provisions would be a breach of good faith. The Prime Minister says if the Crown isn't welcome at Waitangi next month, then he won't go. A Waitangi marae elder, Kingi Taurua, has said if the government signs the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal next week, the marae should close its gates to John Key. Mr Key says he intends going onto the marae on February the 5th.
Every year there's always been a call for me not to be able to go or some sort of protest, but I'm not going to gate crash the place. In the end, if the governing body of the marae say they don't want me there, then I won't be there.
John Key says he's more than happy to answer questions on the trade deal at Waitangi. The cattle seen wading in a high country Canterbury lake belong to businessman Hugh Fletcher and the Chief Justice Dame Sian Elias. RNZ News reported yesterday that a photo of the cattle in the lake showed a clear breach of the Regional Council's rules for protecting waterways. On a visit to Lakes Station today, RNZ News was told by Hugh Fletcher that although Lake Taylor was fenced off from his cattle, he did occasionally let them into the lake for a drink on hot days. The lake is next door to a Department of Conservation camping ground and is a popular fishing spot. A complaint has now been laid with the Regional Council Environment Canterbury over concerns about the cattle fouling the lake. The council says it's investigated another complaint about animals being allowed to enter the lake in 2013. The police are investigating threats made against a woman who filmed herself sexually abusing a 1-year-old boy for $300. Crystal Harvey was sentenced to 8 months home detention, 100 hours community work and a year of post-detention conditions when she appeared in the Manukau District Court yesterday. The case has sparked outrage online, with some writers threatening to do Harvey physical harm. A spokesperson for the police confirmed they're taking the threat seriously. The Crown asked Judge Phil Recordon to jail Harvey for performing a sex act on the boy and selling the video to a paedophile. But the judge opted for home detention after a probation and psychological report found she had a low risk of reoffending. The 23-year-old will also be monitored for 20 months. She's been taken into custody this afternoon, but RNZ was prevented from entering court. The Ministry of Health is advising women who are pregnant or who may become pregnant to avoid travelling to areas where the Zika virus is present. The mosquito-borne infection has been linked to an increase in babies born with abnormally small heads. Outbreaks have been identified in 20 countries, including Samoa and 7 others in the Pacific. The virus is affecting every country in the Americas except Canada and Chile, which, like New Zealand, don't have the carrier mosquito species. Laura Rodriguez from the London School of Tropical Medicine says there are several possible reasons why it's spreading so fast.
I think the possible hypothesis, the virus might have had a mutation that made it easier to spread. It could be that the way people live is changing, and it's also more global traveling. Now people travel much more, so there's much more chance for infectious diseases to become global.
Professor Laura Rodriguez, there's no vaccine or drug treatment as yet for Zika. Horticulture New Zealand says more than 500 seasonal workers stuck in Vanuatu could miss out on crucial work in New Zealand. Air New Zealand has suspended its flights to and from Vanuatu because of damages to the runway at Port Vila. It means seasonal workers booked to fly to New Zealand in the next few weeks to pick fruit are grounded until a solution is found. The National Labour Coordinator for Horticulture New Zealand, Gerard van Beek, told Checkpoint the situation is urgent as growers need pickers and workers need work. In sport, New Zealand fast bowler Mitchell McClenaghan will be changing to the new style batting helmet following his eye injury in the first one-dayer against Pakistan. McClenaghan will miss the rest of the series after a bouncer got between the grill and helmet and fractured his left eye socket. He's having surgery on Friday. Number 11 batsman Trent Boult says it was scary to see his teammate slump to the ground, but he still has confidence in the equipment.
The newer helmets are supposedly that can't happen. The visor gap between the grill and the lid is supposed to be smaller, so Mitch was wearing an older helmet, I believe. I think that's down to his personal preference, but yeah, generally the newer helmets are a bit more indestructible.
Trent Boult says short pitch deliveries are part of the game. 6 straight losses in the Australian Basketball League have the champion New Zealand Breakers title defence on life support. And now the outgoing Breakers coach Dean Vickerman is having to deny rumours of disharmony among his players.
I got asked at the press conference, so it was kind of the first I had to ask the people afterwards what they were talking about. So certainly, nothing that I know about within the group, and certainly no effect on our team.
Dean Vickerman. The Breakers take on the Townsville Crocodiles on Friday in Auckland. Realistically, Dean Vickerman's team must win their final 5 matches to have any chance of defending their title. And the American tennis great Serena Williams has beaten Russia's Maria Sharapova for the 18th straight time to reach the Australian Open semi-finals again, where she'll play Poland's Agnieszka Radwanska. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the Zambian odyssey of Rachel Meadowcroft. She went there to do some volunteer work and to marry her fiancé, who's from Zambia. Rachel speaks to us from somewhere near Lusaka, and our philosopher Anne Kerwin imagines how Plato would cope if he found himself on one of those reactionary TV chat shows, hosted by the likes of Glenn Beck or Rush Limbaugh. But for most of the night, it's me, Brian Crump, from afternoon news at 7 actually, on RNZ National.
Met service weather to midnight tomorrow, Whanganui to Wellington and also Wairarapa. Showers late tomorrow morning, some possibly thundery with thunderstorms. Heavy with thunderstorms about the ranges. Showers becoming frequent at night from Horowhenua to Wellington. For the remainder of the North Island, scattered showers, mostly afternoon and evenings, some heavy with thunderstorms tomorrow and possibly torrential downpours about the central high country and Northland. Nelson and Marlborough excluding the Kaikoura coast, mostly cloudy with some showers. Canterbury and the Kaikoura coast, scattered rain becoming widespread tomorrow. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, some rain or showers. Otago and Southland, scattered rain. And the Chatham Islands, low cloud lowering to fog at times. It's 6:08.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina.
I'm sorry about the weather.
That's all right.
I've had complaints and I can't do anything about it.
No, you can't.
Yes. I'm
That's
hoping
unfair.
that the rain will take away some of the heat, so maybe that's what happened there.
Is it going to happen?
I'm hoping so.
Right, good.
Let's hope.
Thanks, Katrina. Katrina Batten with the news on RNZ National. Leaving behind me. People say it's rude for Katrina to leave behind me if you're watching on live stream, but otherwise you just have to sit here for the entire hour and a half, which just sort of sit in the corner, which wouldn't be much fun at all for her. So she leaves and goes and preps the bulletins and does her work. 6:08, and I think I've already said that. The Prime Minister's gone on the front foot over New Zealand's intention to formally sign the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal during his first post-cabinet briefing of the year. Now, a 279-page national interest analysis was released by the government today, reiterating the government's assertion the deal will add $2.7 billion to GDP by 2030. The agreement is due to be signed in Auckland next week. Speaking to reporters after his first cabinet meeting of the year, John Key insisted the government is on the right side of public opinion with the TPP.
Oh, I think we're winning the argument actually with the New Zealand public, who have seen for a long period of time that asking New Zealand businesses to compete with one hand tied behind their back in the biggest economy in the world, the United States, and the third largest like Japan, puts us in a disadvantaged position. I think there's been a lot of misinformation about TPP. We released a fair bit when we first announced the deal. We released the text, and the national interest analysis is just another step in that. So there's nothing new about that. We always do that.
Well, there was only a small TPP protest at Ratana over the weekend. Feelings are likely to run much higher at Waitangi next week. In fact, there's lots of protest meetings in the next week or so, particularly as the deal is being signed the day before politicians walk onto the lower marae, Te Ti. Ngā Pui Kaumātua Kingi Taurua has threatened to close the marae gates to John Key if the deal is signed. Mr Key says unless he's expressly told he's not wanted there, he intends to show up.
So, in the end, I'm not going to gate crash the Lower Marae. But every year there's always been a call for me not to be able to go, or some sort of protest. I mean, whether it was the mixed ownership model, whether it was mining, there's been a series of different issues about which, Kingi and others have had a view. But I turned up to Waitangi because I made that commitment when I was leader of the opposition that I would go there and engage in debate. Now, if they want to have a debate about TPP, I'm more than happy to do that, and actually I'd really actively encourage them to listen.
John Key says if the governing body of Te Ati Marae decide they don't want him to go, then he won't. He says regardless of whether he's there or not, he thinks there will be a protest against the TPP.
There's been a group of people that are just opposed to TPP long before they saw the text, long before they saw the national interest analysis. They're just fundamentally opposed. But these people are opposed to free trade deals. But I don't see any protests in New Zealand to rip up any free trade deal that we've signed. Why? Because they're in New Zealand's interest to do this. This is a free trade deal that gives us access to 800 million middle income consumers. Its economic benefits are about 2.5 times the size of the China FTA. Successive governments have been trying to conclude this deal, and actually it's great for New Zealand.
The Prime Minister John Key, the national interest analysis, by the way, was released by Trade Minister Todd McClay today. It's 279 pages. It is available online. We're going to look at the TPP over the next week. There is a sense that people are very strongly polarised about it or don't often know terribly much about it. Reporter Muriel Baker hit the streets of Auckland to find out what people do know.
Can I ask what you know about the TPPA?
About which?
The TPPA.
TPPA. No idea. Absolutely nothing.
Can I ask what you know about the TPPA?
Nothing.
Nothing?
What is it?
It's the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. It's a big trade deal for New Zealand and other countries. Have you heard about it?
No, I haven't.
Excuse me, can I ask what you know about the TPPA?
No.
Have you heard about it?
No.
Oh, I know nothing about it. I'm busy, sorry.
It's the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement.
Oh, I don't agree with it, sorry.
No? What don't you agree with?
It's totally going to destroy our country. Economy-wise, there's nothing in it for us to benefit from.
Not a lot, but it's not a good deal for this country. Getting shafted by the US, every other country.
Yeah, it's going to destroy our country.
What makes you say that?
Letting companies sue the New Zealand government. Yeah, strongly against it.
Just that it's going to be good for New Zealand, so get on with it.
Just the fact of there's a lot of overseas control on our small business, exports, things like that. Good side of it, we get better drugs rather than the make-up drugs that sort of get fired at us. So yeah, there's a balance each way.
Interesting comments here on the streets of Auckland. You would have heard about the third to last man say that it lets companies sue the New Zealand government. We will raise that very specific point. It is a real concern of people with Todd McClay when we speak to him in the next few days. 13 minutes past 6. Top Gun, eat your heart out. The New Zealand Air Force has been flying low over Hawke's Bay today. It's been running sorties in Hercules C-130s, practising aerial drops similar to those already done by Australia in the Middle East. A miniature tent town has also been set up on the side of the airfield at Napier Airport for what's been dubbed Exercise Skytrain. Our defence reporter, Kate Pereira-Garcia, on the ground there and has also been up in the air. Kate, that's a big old Herc behind you. What was it like? What's going on there, first of all?
Well, it's a 2-week exercise with about 180 Air Force and Army personnel that are here. The French were also here earlier in the week. They had to go back to Noumea. And basically they've just created a forward base, which is the tent city that you can see around me if you're watching on the television. And they're doing, as you said, aerial drops. So they're practicing pushing things out of Hercules, really, and then the Army are going and collecting them.
Okay, obviously this is kind of useful in the South Pacific when there's aid drops and stuff after a cyclone. You went up on one of the flights. What was it like?
I did. It was fantastic. It's not probably something I'd want to do too often, though. I can say I wasn't sick. There were people on the flight that were, and I won't name them, to be fair. But it was just a fascinating look at how they do these things. And it's not the most comfortable flight, to be sure. But, you know, it is, as you say, important work. Aid drops throughout the Pacific, and as you mentioned in your show there, Australia are already using them in Iraq.
Yeah, 50 years old, those Hercs now. There's been an upgrade. How are they going? Look, I love them to bits, but are they working?
Well, you and everybody here, John, they've been very popular. Nobody here's got a bad word to say about them. They have worked. I'm told they haven't been broken down at all in the last 2 weeks. They've been very reliable. The pilot that flew our flight today, actually, she was an Australian woman, which was quite nice, and she's on secondment with the Air Force. She says they fly similar planes in Australia, slightly newer, but she said these ones are perfectly good. They have had an upgrade, which has kept them going. Of course, they are going to need replacing, and that's a big question for the government. It's something that they will have to have been looking at, and I'm sure they have in the Defence White Paper, which is due out in March or possibly early April. So we should get a preview then, I guess. The people I spoke to today, including, as I said, that pilot, now she flew one of those missions in Iraq. She said that she'd be happy if they just got a new version of the Hercules. She said they're great planes.
Thanks, Kate. Very envious of that. We're just looking at some pictures of you listening on the radio. Lovely pictures of the Hercules flying over the Hawke's Bay. Kate Pereira Garcia is our defence reporter. After Cyclone Pam, I flew back to New Zealand on a Herc, and they circled the islands to try and get some sense of the damage in places like Tana, but all around, and also to see where they could drop supplies off. And you fly low and slow in these trundling old trucks, and it is absolutely magnificent, particularly when you're up in the cockpit. The view is quite extraordinary. Beautiful planes. They're 50 years old, New Zealand Air Force's Hercules. Let's turn to sport. The Black Caps have got their three-match one-day series against Pakistan off to a good start. Hard to beat it, really. Beating the visitors by 70 runs at the Basin Reserve in Wellington yesterday. The match wasn't without drama. Pace bowler Mitchell McClenaghan was taken to hospital after a bouncer from Anwar Ali found its way between the grill of his helmet and the visor to give him a really nasty shiner in his left eye. I spoke to sports reporter Matt Chatterton about all of this.
Well, he's coming back to Auckland today after being in hospital yesterday down in Wellington. He is going to hospital on Friday in Auckland to have some surgery, minor surgery done on his eye socket. He did have to get stitches on his eyebrow. He's copped quite a shiner though. If you take a look at his Twitter or Instagram account, he's got a big black eye on his left eye.
So he is definitely out for the next Black Caps game.
Yes, he won't be playing in Napier tomorrow. Well, unfortunately, the weather's supposed to be bad in Napier anyway. But yeah, I think if all goes to plan, he could possibly play in the Chappell Hadley series between New Zealand and Australia, which starts next Wednesday.
Which is a really exciting prospect.
Yes, that's if all things go to plan.
Can we discuss his helmet? This is a helmet designed to protect you from precisely the delivery that got to him. How on earth did the ball get through?
Simple answer to this one, actually. Trent Bolt earlier said that he believes that McClenaghan actually uses a helmet, older style helmet, so it's a bit of an issue with, you have to weigh up the options here. You can either have the older style helmet where the gap's a little wider between the visor and the grill so you can see the ball coming onto you better, or you go for the protection and have it at the required level so that the ball can't get through.
Right, but there's much more stuff in front of your face.
Yes,
so it's like playing cricket in prison, really, isn't it?
It is, it really is. So you've got this cage in front of you, and it can be a bit of a nuisance when you're trying to face someone coming at you at 140 kilometres like a mare can get it up to. So it's one of those balancing acts, safety, or do you want to be able to see the ball coming onto you?
Okay. Gosh, let's go to New Zealand's middle order. We were in trouble. What were we, 99 for 6 yesterday?
Yeah, after about 23 overs.
And then suddenly saved by
Henry Nicholls, just 24-year-old, and Mitchell Santner, who's been in the team for a while now. He's played a few matches for New Zealand. He played over in the Australian tour last year. He also played in England as well. They put on an 80-run partnership between them before Mitchell was unfortunately caught out by the big Irfan, 7-foot giant, you would call him, pace bowler. He was, he topped one back to the wicket keeper, unfortunately.
How quickly does Irfan bowl?
Sort of mid to 130s, I believe. So, but still, it's that bounce, particularly
the height it's coming down at you from.
So you've got this giant man coming at you, and he could pitch it probably only about 4 feet in front of you, but it would still bounce up and catch you in the chest with where its action comes from. So
what happened to the Pakistani bowling? Because they started so well, and the Black Caps were on the ropes, and then they started to sort of drift off and look wayward.
They did a little bit. They started bowling very short and a bit wide, and it sort of really gave that tail end, like Matt Henry, who went on to make 48, and Mitchell himself, who made 31. They were just bowling too short and too wide at the base, and then they were able to pick it up quite easily, and they piled on the runs. If you compare it to how Trent Bolt bowled it to the death, he bowled really full, really straight, and he picked up 4 wickets. He completely destroyed that tail end of Pakistan. So they just didn't quite get their line and length right.
If we look at the summer so far, it's all been about the top order, right? And also, of course, some of our bowlers. And And then suddenly yesterday, two chaps who are much less lower profile step up. This speaks of depth, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does. I mean, it's good news going into the T20 World Cup in March in India, but it also does show, I mean, we're missing Brendan McCullum, we're missing Ross Taylor due to injury. We're also missing Tim Southey due to his injury with his foot. So, you know, we've got all these players out. Mitchell's also out now for a couple of games due to the eye socket. And we've got some young and up-and-comers like you've got Henry Nichols, like you've got Matt Henry, who's really starting to push, you know, the envelope and really earn that spot in the New Zealand team.
As an all-rounder, as a good all-rounder.
Yeah, he can really pile on the runs when he wants to.
OK, let's change subject. And Charlie, the football ferns are into the Rio Olympics. This is exciting for them, isn't it, the women's football team?
It is really exciting. Came as a bit of a shock, I suppose, in the end to them, how they qualified. I spoke with Tony Reddings just maybe about an hour or two ago, and he said that they were a little bit disappointed with how it came about. So what's happened is they went and played Papua New Guinea in the Olympic qualifier for Oceania in Lae. They won 7-1 on Saturday. Came back to New Zealand to play the second leg because you have to play 2 legs. And unfortunately, the Papua New Guinea side didn't have the correct visas to come into New Zealand, and they've had to withdraw from the second leg and automatically give New Zealand the spot at Rio.
So they're through. They would have. I mean, this, you know, so they would have beaten Papua New Guinea anyway. This is a good side, isn't it? In fact, if we look at them relative to women's football, they're a much better performing side than the men's team are, right?
Oh, they are quite a competent side. They're 16th in the world, which for New Zealand football is very impressive because most people in New Zealand probably don't associate, you know, football with New Zealand culture. So it's great to see that that is the case. And they've got a couple of up-and-coming tournaments. So I did ask Tony, you know, does this really actually affect your preparations for Rio? And he said, while it's disappointing, not so much. He said it would have been nice to give a few other players a bit of a go tonight, because with such a big lead like 7-1, he could afford to give a few younger players or a few different players, a few different combinations a go. But unfortunately, that's not going to be the case. But yeah, as I say, they do have a couple of big tournaments coming up that they'll be playing in preparation for the Olympics. And then they've got this June international window where they'll also be playing. So yeah, there's a lot of football coming up for the team, that's for real.
Our Auckland sports reporter, Matt Chatterton. 22 minutes past 6. Lots of feedback coming in. A couple on Ashley's flight back from Vanuatu, the most eccentric situation where, because she booked through Air New Zealand, her seat has been cancelled because Air New Zealand are no longer flying in and out for the time being until the runway is fixed. But she was on an Air Vanuatu codeshare plane and the flight is still going. Dave says, same seat on the same flight. Is that even legal? Ben says, was the person carrying travel insurance? And I suppose, would travel insurance cover it? That's a very good question, and we'll find out. More generally about Vanuatu, Paul says, good you are covering this. Tourism and seasonal work are very important to Vanuatu. Why has the Vanuatu government let the runway fail? I just think they ran out of money, actually. I think they did have a facility secured from the World Bank, and then things went seriously pear-shaped on the political scene up there. I think the rebuilding work is going to happen. Cracks in the runway. Air New Zealand itself says, look, it's not dangerous at the moment, but it's on its way to becoming dangerous, and we want to draw a line in the sand, so to speak, before that happens. Cows in the lake. Lots and lots of feedback on this Lake Taylor. Bruce says what they don't want to admit is that for decades they've treated waterways as a fence they didn't have to build. Fee says someone needs to be held accountable. Cow poo equals polluted New Zealand rivers. Jen says so federated farmers only accept rules if it's practical to them. John says that federated farmers president is right in the brown cow excretion. And Ben says federated farmers skirting around the lake, they need a new president. Thank you for all of your feedback. Coming up at 6:30, which is in 6 minutes from now, World Watch PM with John Greaves. European cabinet ministers openly clash over the refugee crisis gripping the continent, and in one of the biggest arms deals in the world, India signs a multi-billion euro deal to buy French fighter jets. Parts of New Zealand sweltering in the hot summer weather, but the US East Coast is still coping with the aftermath of the weekend blizzard. Washington won't be getting back to normal for several days, of course, after the blizzard dropped more than 60 centimetres of snow along the US East Coast, likely causing billions of dollars of damage and killing more than 30 people. The US capital has been at a standstill, and officials have now reported at least 36 storm-related deaths, including traffic accidents and heart attacks while shoveling snow in Washington, Delaware, Kentucky, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, South Carolina, Ohio, Tennessee and Virginia. And in Washington, D.C. itself, many vehicles remain buried in snow on the city's streets. Here's Gillian Kitchener from Reuters.
It's supposed to be the calm after the storm, but looking at the side streets in Washington, D.C., some residents would say it's anything but.
If you turn around, look at those. I mean, people can't even walk. This is ridiculous.
The mayor says it will take several more days for the city to return to normal after the massive blizzard dumped more than 2 feet of snow here. And that means many cars will remain parked on smaller streets, looking a lot like snowmen.
Roads right now are not looking too good on the side streets. We happen to live on the main street, and the main pathways look pretty good, but we're just digging out, trying to get ahead of the ice storm.
The remnants of the weekend storm has brought the nation's capital to a standstill. With federal government offices ordered shut Monday, the city's metro is on a limited schedule. And despite an increase in resources deployed to clear the white stuff, a snow emergency remains in effect, with Washington residents taking matters and shovels into their own hands.
Reuters in Washington, D.C. 4 minutes to go on the program. This is wonderful. Well, it's not wonderful, actually, it's outrageous. You say rabid, they say feminist. Oxford dictionaries have come under fire on social media amid accusations of sexism in its example sentences. A Canadian anthropologist tweeted the publisher last week about the sentences which include a nagging wife, for the word nagging, and her high grating voice as an example of grating. And now a Twitter storm is brewing, despite claims from the publisher that they'll change the examples. A linguistic anthropologist at Canada's MacEwan University, Sarah Schulist, is on the line via Skype video. Welcome, Sarah. It's lovely to have you on the radio and all other forms of transmission in New Zealand. I'm just looking at these examples. Shrill women's voices. Psyche, I will never really fathom the female psyche. Is someone making this up, or are these actual examples in the Oxford Dictionary?
They are actual examples in the Oxford Dictionary. It actually, once they, the rabid feminist example was the one that a few people picked up on, and then starting to look at it, it just snowballed through the whole dictionary.
Unbelievable. What sort of response have you had on social media?
It's alternately really positive and exciting. The Oxford Dictionary responded to the person who started this, which was Michael Lamont Reagan from Memorial University. And initially they were very snarky in their response, which I think actually doubled the number of people who became interested in it. And they've doubled back on that and apologized and promised to actually look into it. But there's been a lot of people who are suggesting, oh, it's no big deal, the usual things like that. But at the same time, a lot of people are kind of drawing attention to this idea that, no, the dictionary actually does help us think about words in a certain way instead of just, describing neutrally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is our language and how we use it. So it's important the dictionary gets it right. What are the most egregious examples that you've seen?
I think you've got all the good ones there. Her shrill voice was my personal favorite.
Wow.
Words completely out of nowhere will never understand the female. Because the thing is, I think worth saying about, like, when we talk about something shrill, it is a pejorative statement that's often used, right? But something like, I'll never understand the female psyche, it's not as though that's something that gets said every day. So you can't exactly hide behind a cloak of, we're just describing language the way it's used in something like that.
Yeah, I like also housework. An example sentence was given, she still does all the housework. It's 1953 at the Oxford Dictionary, isn't it?
And going through, the doctors are all men and the nurses are all women. All those details.
Wait a second. So all the examples of doctor is the male pronoun, and all the examples of nurse, it's the female. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Well, they'd be very happy together, the doctors and nurses, and then the nurse can go home and do the housework, right? And the doctor can play golf or have a drink. It's brilliant. It's like an episode of Happy Days. So what? We've got 30 seconds. We're almost out of time. What is the Oxford Dictionary saying back?
Right now, they've issued an apology and promised to revisit it. I mean, you said it as though they're going to change it, and I'm not sure that's actually going to happen. It's gotten a lot of media attention, which is good, but I'd like to see them actually think differently about the way they choose their examples.
Absolutely. Sarah Schulist, who is a linguistic anthropologist at Canada's MacEwan University. Thank you so much for joining us, Sarah, and thank you so much for joining us on Checkpoint. We appreciate your company here on RNZ. Time for World Watch.
You're listening to RNZ National, where it's 6:30. Welcome to World Watch PM. I'm John Greaves. Tonight, Europe becomes the focused target for Islamic State attacks. 15 million people in Ethiopia are likely to starve. A big year for Pacific politics, but how many women will run in elections? And security stepped up in Egypt 5 years on from the fall of Hosni Mubarak. Those stories and more in World Watch PM. The European Union's law enforcement agencies warned that Islamic State militants have set up a specialist command tasked with plotting Paris-style attacks across Europe. Europol says the killings in France and the downing of a Russian airliner over Egypt suggest a shift in IS strategy towards going global. It's launched a new counter-terrorism unit with the aim of improving intelligence sharing between national police forces. Here's the BBC's security correspondent, Gordon Carrera.
The warning from Europol comes a day after a new video from the group featuring the men involved in the Paris attacks, which ends with imagery of London and a warning of further attacks to come. The signs are, according to Europol and other security officials, that Paris was not an isolated attack, but maybe part of a broader strategy by the group to send operatives to carry out attacks around the world. This, the Europol director Rob Wainwright said as he launched a new European counter-terrorism centre, made cooperation vital.
What we know from intelligence that has been exchanged is that an external command combat-style task force has been set up within IS in order to plan a campaign of international attacks with a focus on Europe as well. And of course it's important therefore that together with the support of this new European Counter-Terrorism Centre we respond to that threat.
The new centre does not create any kind of centralised police or intelligence service within Europe, but is designed to improve information sharing amongst members, something which was shown to be deficient after evidence that the Paris attackers were easily able to move across borders.
Gordon Carrera. Cabinet members from across the European Union have clashed openly as they struggle to come to terms with thousands of asylum seekers and migrants every day. Many countries are blaming Greece for lax border patrols, making that country the #1 entry point for most refugees. Austria's Interior Minister says Greece needs to quickly dedicate more resources to the problem. Deutsche Welle's Bettina Scharkus reports from Amsterdam.
The Netherlands holds the rotating presidency of the European Union, and it's shifted ministers in another attempt to beat out a deal. Most of the refugees to arrive in the EU over the past year headed to Germany. Interior Minister Thomas de Maizière says the numbers are too high. He wants more solidarity from his European colleagues. We need a lasting, noticeable and sustainable reduction in the number of refugees, and we need it in the coming weeks. Europe is taking the right steps, but it's taking them late. Most refugees reach Europe via the Greek coast. They continue on their journey to the northwest from there. Some of the ministers say Greek border controls are too lax, and Athens isn't doing enough to register the refugees properly. If we don't succeed in securing Europe's external borders, the Greek border, then the Schengen border will shift towards Central Europe. It's up to Greece to act as quickly as possible to dedicate more resources to the problem. Austria is not the only country threatening Greece with expulsion from the Schengen area. European solidarity is being put to the test again.
Bettina Scharkus reporting. It's being called a code red emergency by aid groups, yet the international response to the drought in Ethiopia has been criticised as ponderous. 15 million people in the African country are believed to face food shortages this year. The United Nations says the strongest El Niño climate system in decades has decimated livestock herds and caused crops to fail. Imogen Brennan has our report.
In a medical centre in the Ethiopian village of Menda, babies are being weighed and measuring tapes are wrapped around their arms. Doctors are checking for signs of malnutrition. A woman named Salamwit has brought her baby in for treatment.
I brought my daughter here because she is sick with diarrhoea and a fever, and she has just been screened for malnourishment.